Hey everybody, just want to go over and give some quick thoughts about the upcoming Pacquiao Ugas fight. And since we're here and while we're at it, we might as well talk a little bit about the Ortiz Guerrero fight on the undercard, just because there are a couple of names, and we'll just cover it for purely shits and giggles, really. The thoughts on the Guerrero Ortiz fight is really that this is a fight that's almost a decade too late. I mean, let's face it, both these guys had a heyday, and that heyday has long since passed. I mean, both these guys haven't had a significant win, and I can't tell you how long. And both of them were suffering some serious losses before the big COVID shutdown, if you will. If you want to break it down basically by the numbers, you got Robert Guerrero, who's 38, and a very shop-worn 38 years old. And you got Victor Ortiz, who's 34, and he's had his fair run of rough fights, to say the least, himself. Not to mention that he's been stopped a lot of times. I mean, we're talking about he was stopped in the Mayweather fight. He was stopped by Maidana. He was stopped by Andre Berto. He was stopped by Louis Collazo. He had to retire in the 9th round versus Josito Lopez. He had a broken jaw, okay, but it is what it is. He got stopped. Any way you cut it, he lost. And then you take Robert Guerrero, who really was only stopped one time against Omar Figueroa. But in doing so, he kind of looked like one of those fighters from the old days when you would see a guy who always had a cast iron jaw, and all of a sudden that cast iron jaw didn't work no more. You know what I mean? There was too much money in the cash register and it couldn't hold it anymore. You've seen that happen with numerous fighters throughout history where they had a jaw where you're like, this guy can never be dropped and can never be stopped. But then over time, as they were in war after war after war after war, literally they would wind up with a jaw that looked like anybody in the top 20 could drop them, and you knew the writing was on the wall. That's what Guerrero started looking like at the end. On top of that, we're talking about a man who came up multiple times in weight to wind up at welterweight. So he was at the later stages of his career taking shots from bigger men compared to earlier in his career. And that kind of figures into things too when you look at somebody's jaw or how many times they've been dropped or how many times they're stopped. You might be able to take a lot of shots at featherweight or lightweight. You start hitting welterweight, yeah, you react differently. You're getting hit by a different size, different caliber of guy. It doesn't really bode well. So in the end, what are we looking at? We got two guys, one who hasn't fought since 18, the other one who hasn't fought since 2019. And even before that, their activity levels were not that high. We're talking a fight a year, maybe 2 fights a year. You're talking about guys that were inactive, getting older, taking punishment, losing against higher level opposition. It's just the way it is. Doesn't mean this won't be an exciting fight. Doesn't mean this won't be an entertaining fight. Sometimes you can take two guys and throw them in the ring and have them at the right place at the right time, and it makes a fun fight. But that's all this is a fun fight. It has nothing to do, nobody thinks on any stretch of imagination these guys are ever going to be contenders again. They're ever going to be champions again. They're ever going to be in the top 5 or top 10 again. Those days are over. You're just watching this for the curiosity factor, the name recognition, and, well, basically, the sheer fucking fun of it. Ortiz, I would say, is the more skilled fighter. Probably, maybe still the fresher fighter. But Guerrero, by far, is the tougher fighter, consistently. Ortiz has shown toughness at times, and then at times he hasn't. Guerrero has always been a tough fighter, always a lot of heart. And then you throw in the factor that at the weigh-in, Ortiz looked so drained. He looked ghostly thin and gaunt. I mean, almost skeletal. Like it killed him to make that weight. How do you pick with a fight like this? I don't know. If Guerrero can hold his jaw together and keep it going, I think Ortiz will just fall apart because he just looked that bad at the weigh-in. He looked that bad at the weigh-in. But if there's anything within him, if there's any ounce of fight still left going through that kid, skill-wise, He should be able to move enough and fight enough to keep off of him a blown up featherweight. And now we arrive at the big topic of conversation going on right now. We're talking about the Manny Pacquiao Yordenis Ugas fight. We all know the story about what took place. This wasn't the fight that Manny Pacquiao was supposed to be in. We all know he was supposed to be and was leading up to fighting Errol Spence, who got a partially detached retina, apparently, and the fight was called off. And out of nowhere, Ugas, who is a top-ranked, top-level fighter, was able to just step in and take his place. Good for us. I don't know if it's good for Manny, but it's good for us. They didn't just throw in some no-hoper. They threw in somebody with skill and ability. But the question is, can he beat a Manny Pacquiao? Can he beat a legendary fighter? Well, that depends on two things. One, Ugas has skills. He is a good fighter. He has a huge amateur pedigree. And every time you see him in the ring as a pro, he tends to look good. I know. He had that shit loss that they gave him to Porter, which easily could have went his way. He had that Abel Ramos split decision, which really, you're like, really? You know, he kind of looked like he won that. It was what it was. But that leads me to believe the things about him that I have a slight issue with. When I look at a guy like Ugas, I look at a guy and I say, this guy's got skill. He has knowledge. He looks comfortable in the ring. He knows what he's doing. He fights out of that very tight, I'm going to do this economically and intelligently type of fight plan. If you look at him, he's a counterpuncher. He doesn't like to overextend himself. He doesn't like to do anything that puts himself at great risk. He's just going to use his skills over time, hopefully pull ahead of you, and win the fight. And that's one of the things that can be a bit of a drawback. He doesn't do anything to go outside of himself. He fights kind of within himself. He doesn't go anywhere past the limit. He doesn't push the issue really far to try to make an impression that lasts upon people. We all know Manny Pacquiao. Pacquiao's the kind of guy, he's out there, he's going to fight, he's going to go for it. He sees half of a chance, he's going to take it. That's the kind of guy Manny Pacquiao is. He's a go-getter. He's a legend in the sport. But he's a 42-year-old legend in the sport. A 42-year-old legend who fought from, he's not even really a welterweight, let's be honest. You know, he should be down at lightweight or at least junior welterweight. A welterweight has always been a blown-up position for him. So you have a 42-year-old guy who's really, junior lightweight, super lightweight, maybe up to 140 at best. But because of his speed and his crazy, weird, herky-jerky rhythm and his boxing know-how and his heart, he's had an incredible career at lightweight, or welterweight, pardon me. But we have to throw in there, part of that incredible career at welterweight is due to the fact that he usually has a speed advantage when he fights most of the people that he fights. He usually has that weird, awkward rhythm that gives guy problems, matched with incredible hand speed and solid power. He's not a knockout artist at welterweight by any stretch. He can wear a guy down and get rid of him, but it ain't like he's racking up the KOs over the last several years. Manny Pacquiao is fast, explosive, intelligent, and one of those guys that only comes along so many times in a generation, if more than a generation. So what do I see? I see Ugas, skilled, intelligent, solid, but nothing special. I don't look at him and say to myself, this is a legend, who's, by the way, in his mid-30s also. I don't see him and say to myself, oh, this guy's a world dominator that's going to pop everybody into the seats just to see this dude fight. I don't see that. That's why he has so many fights that can be kind of splitish decision-ish, kind of close. He has a tendency to fight to the level of the people he's fighting at and just go a little bit past it. Pacquiao doesn't play that game. He goes for the gold. He does what he's supposed to do. And the only thing that's going to hold him back in this fight is that he's a 42-year-old who's going for the gold, who hasn't been in a ring since 2019. That's the reality of it. He's 42. He's a small man, and he hasn't fought in 2 years. In closing, if he shows us anything like the guy that showed up, even to Keith Thurman, he's going to beat Ugas. But if Father Time finally works his magic on him, like he did to everybody else, whether it was Ali, whether it was Roy Jones, whether it was Sugar Ray Robinson, no matter who it was, Father Time will catch up. And will this be the fight that Father Time catches up? All right, everybody, just a couple quick thoughts. Spitting them out there. Let's see what happens. Maybe tomorrow, day after, do a recap. Who knows? Anyway, be good. Take care. Go enjoy the fights.